If you've ever known a single, ordinary night that divided your life into a before and an after, you'll understand what I mean. I believed I was just catching a ride home. I believed my Uncle Elias was simply doing what family does, being kind. But somewhere between the glow of the dashboard and the steady rhythm of the highway, one unplanned detour didn't just alter our route. It reshaped how I understood love, trust, and my own reflection forever. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from tonight. What's the name of your town? I like to imagine the map lighting up when I ask, like we're all gathered in one room, just stretched across the world. Let me take you back. It started like so many evenings when you're pretending everything's fine. My name is Clara. Mid-40s, the kind of woman who looks composed in public, because I learned early that most people don't know what to do with an unfiltered truth. I had a steady job, a neat little condo, and a smile that worked like a fresh coat of paint. But if you look closely, you'd see the hairline cracks. That day had been weighty, not loud weighty, the quiet, persistent kind that settles into your bones. My phone had buzzed one too many times. The office had been chaotic. My mind had been louder, and by evening, all I wanted was to dissolve into silence. My mother had insisted on a family dinner. "You've been a stranger lately," she said like it was a tease and not a gentle accusation. So I went. I brought a store, bought pie that tasted like sugar and surrender. I wore a cardigan that made me seem warmer than I felt, and I sat at that familiar table, surrounded by people who knew my childhood nicknames but no longer knew me. Elias was there. Technically my uncle, but not in a distant, formal way. He was my mother's younger brother, only about 12 years older than me, and he'd always felt more like a grounded, older friend. He had a calm way of occupying a room without demanding a thing. The sort of man who listened with his whole attention. He'd been a professional driver for years, long-haul deliveries, executive transport, routes that gave him solitude. He loved the road, said it was the only place where his thoughts could breathe. That night, he barely touched his meal. Not because the food wasn't good, my mother's cooking could mend a hard day, but because he kept watching me with a patient, quiet concern. "You all right, Clara?" he asked when the chatter around the table swelled. I offered my well-practiced smile. "Just tired." He didn't press. He simply nodded, as if he'd heard what I hadn't said and decided to leave space for it. When dinner ended, I tried to slip out quickly. My mom was wrapping leftovers, hugging everyone, calling out reminders to drive safely. The air outside was sharp and cold. My car was parked a few blocks away, tight neighborhood parking, and the walk suddenly felt like a mile. Elias appeared beside me, keys already in hand. "I'll take you," he said. "I'm okay, really. I know you are," he replied, gentle but firm. "Let me take you anyway." There was something in his tone. Not an order, not pity, more like a steady hand offered without making you admit you're off balance. So I agreed. His car was clean, not luxurious, but cared for. It smelled faintly of cedar and old coffee. The dashboard lights glowed a soft amber. He waited until I buckled my seatbelt, a habit he had with everyone, then eased onto the street. For a while, neither of us spoke. The neighborhood passed by in quiet glimpses, porch lights, skeletal trees, a distant dog barking. I stared out the window as if the darkness might hold some answer. Elias kept both hands relaxed on the wheel. He drove the way he lived, attentive, controlled, without rush. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked after some time. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, like my body had been holding onto something for weeks. I began, then let out a breath that sounded like a lie even to me. "It's not nothing. I feel like I'm losing my grip." He nodded once, eyes on the road. "That happens." I glanced at him. "To everyone," he said. "Some people are just better at hiding it." Something about that cracked me open. Maybe it was the plain truth. Maybe it was the way he wasn't shocked or disappointed. He made room for me to be human. "I've been trying to do everything right," I admitted. "The job, the family stuff, the bills, being responsible. But lately I wake up and my own life feels like a stranger's." Elias didn't rush to fix it. He didn't offer empty advice. He just listened, letting the silence between my words feel safe instead of awkward. We reached a stretch where the streetlights grew sparse. The darkness deepened. The headlights cut a narrow path ahead. Outside, the world felt vast enough to swallow you whole. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. I blinked. "For what?" "For still showing up," he replied. "Even when you're not sure why." My eyes stung. That simple sentence landed with more weight than any performance review or polite compliment ever had. I turned my face toward the window so he wouldn't see me soften. I'd never liked crying in front of people. It felt like being seen with the walls down. Elias noticed anyway. He reached over, not touching me, Not crossing a boundary, just resting his hand open near the console. A quiet offering. No pressure. The gesture alone was enough. It said, "Air if you want connection, it's here. If you don't, that's okay too." My fingers hovered, then rested lightly against his for a moment. The contact was brief, simple, and it felt like the first honest thing I'd done in months. I hadn't realized how tense I was until my shoulders began to drop. "You've got a good heart, Clara," he said. "But you carry too much alone." I let out an unsteady breath. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he answered. "You're family. And even if you weren't, caring for someone isn't a burden. It's a choice, and I'm choosing it." The road curved. Trees crowded in on both sides. I frowned. "Elias, this isn't the way to my condo." He glanced at me briefly, then back at the road. I know. My stomach tightened, not with fear exactly, but with that low hum of caution women learn to carry. "Where are we going?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He kept his tone steady. "There's an overlook about 5 minutes from here. I'm not taking you somewhere strange. I promise. I don't think you need to go home to a quiet room and let your thoughts spiral tonight." I hesitated. Then I heard it in his voice, concern, not control. A suggestion, not a trap. He was still the same Elias, the man who always made space for people to breathe. "Okay," I said softly. 5 minutes. We drove in silence again, but it felt different now, less distant, more intentional. When we reached the overlook, the world opened up. It was high ground, the kind of spot locals know and visitors rarely find. The city lights shimmered below like fallen constellations. The air was colder up there, crisp and sharp, but the view made the chill worth it. Elias parked, turned off the engine, and for a moment the sudden quiet felt loud. No tire hum, no engine vibration, just the low, constant whisper of wind. He didn't get out right away. He didn't assume. He looked at me and asked, "Is this all right?" That question, so small, so respectful, made something in me loosen further. "Yes," I said. "It's all right." We stepped out into the cold. The sky was a deep velvet, pricked with stars. I pulled my cardigan tighter. Elias walked a few steps away, giving me room. He never crowded, never rushed. I leaned against the guardrail and looked down at the city. "Sometimes," I said, "I think I've spent so long being strong that I forgot what it feels like to just feel." Elias came to stand beside me, not too close. He rested his forearms on the rail. "Strength isn't about never feeling," he said. "It's about feeling without letting it dismantle you." My breath clouded in the air. "You always sound like you figured it all out." He gave a quiet, low laugh. "Not even close. I just have more practice being honest with myself. Took me years." I turned to look at him. In the faint light, his face seemed softer. "Tired. Human. What happened to you?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened the way it does when someone considers opening a door they've kept closed for a long time. Then he said, "I lost someone I loved because I thought providing was the same as being present." The words hung between us, plain and heavy. "I don't want you to make the same mistake," he added. "Not with yourself." I stared at the city lights, blinking hard. The truth was I'd been grieving, too, not a person, but a version of my life I thought I'd have. One where love felt safe, where home felt warm, where I didn't have to convince myself to rise each morning. Elias didn't ask for details. He just stayed beside me while my silence spoke for me. And then the turn happened, not on the road, but in me. I realized I wasn't just tired or stressed. I was lonely in a way I'd been pretending wasn't real. I'd been surviving, not living. And standing there beside Elias, with the wind moving through the night and the city glowing below, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not admired, not judged, just truly seen. I turned toward him. "Thank you?" I said. "For what?" he asked. "For noticing," I replied. "For not letting me hide behind 'I'm fine.'" He nodded, his gaze steady. "You shouldn't have to disappear to be okay." We stood there longer than I'd expected. The cold began to bite at my fingers. Elias noticed and, without fanfare, shrugged out of his coat and offered it. I hesitated. "You'll be cold." "I'm used to it," he said. I took it. It was warm from his body, heavier than it looked. It smelled like clean cotton and faint, fresh soap. I slipped it on and felt for a moment, held without being held. That's when I said something I'd never voiced aloud to anyone. "I'm scared," I admitted. Elias didn't flinch. "Off what?" "Off waking up 10 years from now," I whispered, realizing I never actually chose my own life. He looked at me, and there was something fierce and kind in his expression. "Then choose it now." The words struck me like a bell in a silent hall. Choose it now, not later, not when it's convenient. Now. I swallowed hard. "I don't even know where to start." Elias nodded toward the car. "Start with tonight. Start with getting home safe. Start with one honest decision." We walked back slowly. The wind followed. The stars held their light, And inside me, something had shifted, like the first gentle turn of a key, the beginning of an opening. He drove again, even calmer than before. As we re-entered the grid of city streets, the lights felt different, less like a blur, more like a map. I watched his hands on the wheel, steady and practiced, and I realized the road wasn't the only thing he knew how to navigate. When we pulled up to my condo, he didn't rush me out. He put the car in park and turned slightly toward me. "Clara," he said softly, "there's something I need you to hear." I looked at him. "What is it?" He took a breath, and I saw the weight behind it, like whatever came next mattered more than pride. "I didn't take you to that overlook just to distract you," he admitted. "I took you because I've been wanting to tell you something for a long time. And tonight felt like the first time you might be ready to listen." My heart beat a little harder, not from fear, but from the sudden sense that the night wasn't finished turning. I held his coat tighter around myself. "Tell me," I said, my voice barely above the wind. Elias's gaze stayed steady on mine, careful, respectful, as if he understood the weight of words and refused to wield them carelessly. And then he began. He didn't speak immediately. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and waiting. "I'm listening," I said again more firmly. He nodded slowly. "I've watched you for years," he began. "At gatherings, holidays. The way you always help clean up even when you're wary. The way you smile so no one asks questions." My chest tightened, not with defense, but with the feeling of being recognized. "And every time," he continued, "I thought she reminds me of someone." I swallowed. "Oh, myself?" he said quietly. That surprised me enough to make me turn fully toward him. "I spent half my life thinking responsibility was the same thing as purpose," Elias went on. "That if I drove enough miles, paid enough bills, stayed reliable, eventually I'd feel whole." He let out a breath, something close to a sad smile. "It doesn't work that way." The street outside was still. One porch light flickered a few houses down. The night felt paused, giving us room. "I don't want to overstep," he said carefully, "and I don't want you to misunderstand. What I feel for you isn't confusion, and it isn't something improper. It's concern. It's respect. And it's the kind of care that comes from seeing someone standing at the same edge I once stood on." My heart settled. I realized I'd been bracing without knowing why. "I didn't bring you up there to change your life," he added. "I brought you there because I hope you might see you're allowed to change it yourself." Something warm gathered behind my eyes. "You really believe that?" "I know it," he replied. "Because I waited too long." He looked straight ahead now, hands resting loosely on the wheel. "I lost my marriage not because of betrayal or some dramatic fight, but because I stopped speaking honestly. I became so focused on being the dependable one that I forgot to be the present one." I sat very still. His words settled into me slowly like snow. "And when it ended," he continued, "I promised myself I'd never stay silent again when I saw someone I cared about shrinking. I thought of all the times I'd dismissed my own feelings, all the nights I told myself tomorrow would be different without changing a thing. So this is you?" I said, not staying silent. "Yes," he answered simply. We sat there, the truth between us. It wasn't heavy in a suffocating way, it was grounding. Real. I handed his coat back slowly. Our fingers brushed, brief and ordinary, but meaningful because nothing about it was rushed or hidden. "Thank you," I said again, "for trusting me with that." He nodded. "Thank you for hearing it the way it was meant." I opened the car door, then paused. "Elias, if I don't change everything overnight, if I go slow, is that still choosing?" He smiled then, not wide, but genuine. "It's the only kind of choosing that lasts." I stepped out into the cold, without his coat now, but strangely warm inside. The air smelled of damp earth and coming frost. Home looked the same, but I didn't. Before closing the door, I leaned back in slightly. "I'm glad it was you driving tonight," I said. "Anyone else might have just taken me straight home." He met my eyes. "I'm glad you said yes." I shut the door gently and watched his car pull away, the taillights glowing red before disappearing around the bend. Inside my condo, the silence was familiar but no longer threatening. I set my keys down, slipped off my shoes, and stood in the living room, just breathing. My phone buzzed with notifications I didn't rush to answer. For once, my thoughts weren't racing ahead of me. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the quiet street. That night didn't end with fireworks or grand declarations. It ended with clarity. In the weeks that followed, small things shifted. I began saying no without apology. I stopped filling every silence with noise. I took walks without headphones. I called people I trusted and spoke honestly, even when my voice trembled. Elias and I talked too. Not constantly, not dramatically, just real check-ins. He never pushed, never hovered. He respected my space the way he'd respected me that night, and whenever I felt myself slipping back into old patterns, I remembered the road, the overlook, the city lights below. That unexpected turn wasn't about where we drove. It was about direction. I didn't become fearless. I didn't reinvent myself in one bold move. But I began choosing presence over autopilot, truth over comfort, gentle growth over quiet resignation. And years from now, when I look back on the moment my life began to turn, I won't remember it as the night my uncle gave me a ride. I'll remember it as the night someone saw me clearly and quietly reminded me it was time to see myself the same way.